Mike versus the world, this edition. What is the best fit for Deion Sanders from a job standpoint? Obviously, a bunch of openings are there available now. His name pops up on a few of them every now and again, Mike. So the question for me as the world is the best job for Deion Sanders, and that answer is Florida State. That's the
Yep.
best job for Deion Sanders. That's the job that he should be holding out and waiting for. Sure, could he go to Auburn? Could he go to Georgia Tech? Yes. But he's in a position where I don't think he has to jump at opportunities. He's Deion freaking Sanders. He's got enough money to retire tomorrow. He's got enough of whatever he needs to go live in Prosper, Texas, and continue to be, whatever it is he wants to be. I don't think he needs to prove himself and go up coaching ladders. I think he took the job at JSU for a few factors. One, obviously, to become a coach. Two, I think he wanted to certainly help rehabilitate that program. I think some of this stuff for him is probably passion driven. And I think Florida State's that spot for him. I think he would kill in that state in recruiting. He's a legend at FSU. All the kids know who Deion is. I think with NIL and everything he can probably do to help kids from that standpoint, I think that would play super, super well in Tallahassee. Here's the thing, Mike. I don't even know if he's really a good coach. I don't honestly know if he's a good X's and O's. Like, he can scheme you up better than anybody else, but he connects with people. I think he can get assistant coaches. I think he can get recruits. I think he can go into living rooms. He did a great job the other day with a speech he gave his team, Mike, about basically them being better about who they are, taking care of themselves. I think he can sell moms and dads with a talent-rich state like Florida, where he's from, where he went. If he walks into any living room with the Florida State logo and spear on his shirt, I think that's going to be a challenge. As somebody who lives in Florida and roots for teams who are in Florida, I don't want Deion at Florida State. So I think the best fit for Deion would be Florida State.
It's a great choice, honestly. And again, it was my first choice. So great minds think alike. But I'm going to make an argument for Auburn, and I'm going to tell you why. Deion, all he has to do, he's a millionaire, right? 80 times over. I would assume the Affleck ads just, would pay the bills. Even if he wasn't Deion Sanders and wasn't the best cornerback to ever live and a Hall of Famer and, very marketable and all that stuff, makes you wonder why he was doing like Miss Universe pageants and things like that. But that's, I digress. The guy doesn't need money, so money isn't a motivator to go to Auburn. So he would have to put up with some headaches as a billionaire. He would have to put up some headaches because he was butting heads with, older millionaires. But if he could do that, if he could put up with that, I mean, Deion recruited.
Big if.
I know. So, I'm just saying, that's why I preface it that way. Deion could recruit at Auburn unbelievably, even better than at Florida State. I know he's a legend at Florida State. I get that. Now, most of the recruits don't. They know who Deion is, of course, but they weren't born when he was playing. Even some of them weren't born when he was with the Falcons. That's just sad fact of life that these kids are all like, born in freaking, when you're recruiting now, they're born in 2006 at the very, some of them 2009, because you recruited 15-year-olds, or not 15, 13-year-olds. So that's a good fit from a, this was a legend here. This is, but if Knute Rockne was around, I don't think he'd do well at Notre Dame. And it's not a great comparison. But Deion would certainly do well recruiting there. But Florida State is also like a diminished brand. It's very competitive in the state of Florida. The Gators haven't been recruiting well. They still have some struggles. Miami's going to recruit well under Cristobal for sure. But everybody's coming in that state now. This isn't the Bobby Bowden days where, they could just pick and choose or even, we're not going to go into South Florida, Butch. But you don't come up here, sort of like this gentleman's agreement almost recruiting wise. That's gone. Now Clemson's as big a threat and Georgia's as big a threat and Alabama's as big a threat as anybody for any of those in-state kids. Auburn, it borders Georgia. It's got great in-state talent in Alabama. Yes, you got to go against Nick Saban. And he can recruit into Florida with his cachet and his Deion-ness. It's really a sleeping giant. And he has the SEC to sell over the ACC. And he's got an opportunity here, I think, for a program that really has lacked personality. We talked about Brian Harsin and his personality. We talked about Gus and his personality. And Gene Chizik, I won't even get started. Out of the three of them, that's probably the worst personality. They just have lacked somebody since Tuberville, who's had a personality, an aura, and Deion would just kill it at Auburn. That's why I think Auburn's the best fit. Now, Florida State may or may not come open. Mike Norvell's 5-3, I believe. They got off to a hot start, then they lost to real teams, but they still own a victory over LSU, the number 10 team in the country. I don't think he's going anywhere fast, and I think Deion might take this opportunity and say, I got to jump now. And Auburn's a great sleeping giant fit. That's my take.
I don't think he has to jump now. I mean, I think he's comfortable where he's at. I think he's obviously had success at Jackson State, right? I think for that job for him is certainly probably more of just a personal life goal, right? And sort of getting that program back and probably overall with HBCUs kind of bringing that back to the forefront. I don't think he has to jump right now. I think the Auburn stuff is attractive for sure, because I do think, let's not forget, this is a man who called himself primetime, right? He's got an ego. He's not over here just sitting humbly in the corner, knitting wool caps. Like he wants to be in the spotlight. Auburn allows him to do that. I just don't see it as a passion element for him. I don't see him going to turn around Auburn as something that is a connective point for him. I think Florida State offers him that, right? And you said, hey, kids are leaving Florida State. Kids are leaving Florida. I don't know if they do that if Deion was there. To your point, I know they don't know him as a player, but I'm imagining they got some pictures of Deion walking around the offices there at Florida State, right? I'm gonna imagine that some of these kids' dads and uncles and relatives saw Deion play and are gonna be pretty impressed with him as a recruiter when he comes in the living room. I think that's what Florida needs. Think about this, Mike. That sets up a fantastic battle. You've got Mario Cristobal, by all accounts, a great recruiter down in Miami. You bring Deion to Tallahassee, and hopefully with his cachet, all of a sudden Florida State Miami becomes a thing again, right? And those two programs are recruiting at a high level. That would be a fantastic thing. And I think probably an element of Deion sees what Miami's doing and maybe says, hey, geez, do I want to do that? So I think Florida State's a no-brainer. I have a second option. I'm going to throw a wild card second option at you that I think would be a good fit. Are you ready? This is unprecedented in Mike versus the world.
Oh, ready? Can I guess it?
Yes.
I don't think you're going to go Texas A&M. I don't think you're going to go Texas. Are you going to go Florida?
No, he would never go to Florida.
He might. First of all, that would shock the world, and Florida State fans would probably just all collectively jump off a cliff. But what's your team?
And what's Texas?
It's an intriguing.
He's obviously big in Texas. He loves Texas. I think that'd be another interesting one. I think UT would be one that'd be interesting.
And the reason I didn't bring them up, and I looked at Texas A&M as an option too, and I just think that job's might be too big for Deion, because we don't know if Deion's a good coach, right? And
I have no idea. I have no clue.
They kind of just hired a guy who's not a good coach, and they gave him $100 million, right? And they're learning this very fast. Sorry, Jimbo, but you're doing a horrible job. So do they really want to take a shot on a guy they don't know if he can coach or not? I don't think they will. Texas, the reason I didn't mention Sark is because, things are trending slightly upwards. And that
for sure.
That Arch Manning thing, I think, keeps him around for at least 2 more years. And I to your point, I'm not sure if Deion's happy or content.
Yeah,
I mean, listen,
this
is a guy with a massive ego who is making the news nowadays at Jackson State by being offended that people don't call him HBCU caliber, right? But that's how he's going to make the news, or making speeches or whatever. And yeah, game day was just there, but it's almost like he's really having to work really hard for attention. And Deion loves attention, and they are the number 1 team in HBCU, and he's playing, competing with Florida A&M, North Carolina A&T, Southern, Prairie View A&M, North Carolina Central. These aren't the teams that he really wants to be competing with, and these aren't. Now his son's there. I get that, but that's not going to last forever.
Well, his son can also, wherever he goes, his son can transfer too, right? So it's not like his son's stuck there.
Yeah, I think he might be itching for something, and I think he's looking at the landscape, and he's like, well, okay, Georgia Tech was a program that I thought of, because Deion has cachet in Atlanta. It could be considered a sleeping giant, but it's not, because Georgia owns that recruiting space and has for 100,000 years and will always own that recruiting space. And now everybody is coming into Georgia. It's almost like Florida years ago when Urban Meyer decided to go into South Florida and actually make waves. Once people started coming into Georgia, which was also probably 15, 20 years ago, more consistently, Georgia Tech had no chance, and they just don't have a chance. Even with Deion, they don't have a chance. Even with NIL, even with the city of Atlanta, they don't have a chance. So that's not an attractive job for him at all. The other option that's open is Auburn. That's a fit for him. He's not going to Nebraska. He's not going to Wisconsin. You know, Deion in the cold, and that doesn't work. But Auburn might be too attractive for him to turn down if they offered him, because I don't think he's content. I don't think he's happy. You know, have you been to? This is no offense to Mississippi, but Jackson.
I've never been to Jackson, Mississippi. No.
Okay, what?
I've never been to Jackson, Mississippi. I have not, and I can't imagine. I imagine that Deion's the biggest thing in Jackson in some respects.
Yeah, but it's not Deion, man. I've been to Jackson. I've been to Atlanta. You know, I've obviously been to Tallahassee. Even Tallahassee's not very big at all, but it's like
it's really not.
Jackson. This is a prime time, man. This is Dallas. This is Atlanta. Now, I'm not saying Auburn, Alabama is prime time either, but it's a big ass program. It puts him on a national stage. He's going to be in the news every day because he's going to be going head to head with Nick Saban and all this other stuff. I'm just saying it might be attractive for him, and it's not a bad job for him because he's got the ego to stand up to these guys. You know, we did one on Lane Kiffin and his ability to stand up because he doesn't care. Deion also doesn't care, and I think they're less apt to attack him than they would.
Well, so, but that's not the question, though, Mike. The question is, what's the best fit? Your argument is that this may be the right time to move, not that this is the best fit for him, right? He could probably go anywhere, but you have to kind of shoehorn his fit here into Auburn, where I think there are other natural fits. I'll throw you a third one, actually, that I think he would go to. You ready?
So the first two are not open jobs. So what's the third one?
And neither's a third one. Arkansas.
Okay. Oh, what are you doing? Do you want
Jerry Jones is the biggest booster in Arkansas history. If somehow Sam Pittman leaves, and again, that's a big if Sam Pittman leaves, has to go someplace,
Arkansas fans are going to show up to us. Sam Pittman is a national treasure.
I agree with you. I'm not saying he's not, but if Sam Pittman decides, hey, I'm going to go take that Auburn job, I'm just throwing this out there. Jerry Jones' influence at Arkansas is huge.
Oh, it is. Listen, connect the dots is fun. I mean, you know, we could talk about West Coast jobs because Deion was great at San Francisco 49ers, blah, blah, blah. But none of those jobs are open. And I think you're talking potentially, I thought Norvell would struggle to win 6 games this year. He's got 5 in the can now. And you know, let me look at their schedule real quick for you.
If they get blown out again, they play Miami. I don't know, whenever you're watching this, Florida State, Miami have an upcoming game. If that goes bad, I mean, you can see wheels coming off in a hurry.
And then Syracuse, you know, is still a top 20 team. Louisiana, that should be okay. And then Florida. So they got 2 of the next 4 games are huge rivalry games. If he gets blown up by Miami, blown up by Florida, he could be gone. So there's that point. You know, the 4 wins this season was offset by Wake Forest, NC State, and Clemson lost, and then they beat Georgia Tech, but nobody cares. So, yeah, he's still on a warm seat. Sark, I don't think, is on any sort of warm seat because of Arch. And obviously Sam Pittman can stay as long as he wants at Arkansas. So to me, it's not about squeezing him into a fit. Like, oh, these are the jobs that are open and he better take one of them. To me, it's squeezing him into a fit that's really good for him as well, if he can put up with the garbage, and getting him out of Jackson. You know, and again, this is not a slight at Jackson. This is not the stage he wants, man. He's the biggest fish in the smallest pond possible. And Deion wants to be the biggest fish in a big lake. And how bigger does it get than going into the state of Alabama and competing with Nick Saban? That's big. So that's why I think it's the best fit for him. Florida State was my first choice, but I just don't know if that job's going to be available. And I also think there's a pressure aspect, and not that Deion will feel pressure. But if Deion goes to Florida State after Jimbo ruined them and Willie Taggart set them back, and Mike Norvell obviously would be a failure if Deion ends up there, what if it doesn't work? Does he hurt his legacy at Florida State? And that's a thought. He's got a legacy with the Cowboys, but the 49ers fans hate him for that. He's got a legacy with the 49ers, but the Cowboys fans hate him for that. Like, I get it. But the one true legacy he has, the true legacy is Florida State. That will never change. And if he goes back there and sucks, it might
But
ruin.
a guy like Deion's ego doesn't think about sucking. He thinks about I can't wait to get to Florida State and turn this thing around. He's never gonna ever think I'm gonna run this thing into the ground.
Yeah, I get it. I understand what you're saying. I'm just thinking like, and he's not thinking that. I'm just thinking, that if I were Deion, that would be a consideration. But I don't think there's anything that's a consideration. When it comes to anything that's going to, ego's going to win over logic every time. So I'm going to say Auburn for him. Now, again, I don't know if he can coach a lick, and Auburn needs a coach.
There's that too, yes.
Auburn needs a coach, and they need someone who's going to be successful. But they also need somebody with a personality. This isn't anything against Gus. I like Gus, but he's got no personality. None. Brian Harsin has the opposite of a personality. I just don't think there's a lot to be liked there. And then, Gene Chizik, same thing as Brian Harsin. They need somebody who's likable that the program can get around. And Deion loves to be loved. I'll tell you what, Auburn, they would love him. So that's my point.